ओम नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. We were discussing the 38th sutra, Swapna Nidra Jnana Lambanam Va. The concentration of the mind can be attained by fixing the mind upon a dream experience or the experience of deep sleep. Now, this has to be understood a bit carefully because there are so many dream experiences which we have. So trying to fix the mind upon those dream experiences is not going to achieve anything for us. Leave alone concentration of mind, it may be positively harmful. Here, the dream experience referred to is about a holy personality or a divine symbol. So if there is a vision or a dream experience of some divine personality, holy personality whom we know, sometimes we get dreams or visions in the dream of some personality whom we have never met. So maybe the samskaras of the previous life enable one to get such kind of dreams. And then when they suddenly realize or suddenly see that person in front of them, maybe who is alive or who may not be alive, some photograph or something, and then they realize that this is the person whom I saw in the dream, and the dream experience is so strong that the memory of it never fades away. So Patanjali here is speaking about the dream experiences about some holy personality or a divine symbol of any religion. They can be called experiences. They can be compared to some kind of vision because they bring a sense of joy and a sense of revelation which remains with us even after we have woken up. It's not that we enjoyed the scene, enjoyed that vision in the dream, but even after waking up, you have a feeling that you had seen it. It is more alive to you than the experiences of the waking state. So some people, when they get such experiences, Patanjali says you have to meditate on that. So in our spiritual literature, we'll find many people who even have received a divine mantra or some kind of instruction from some great teacher of the past or even present. During Sri Ramakrishna's lifetime, we saw that many people, some of the devotees had seen him giving him a mantra. I think that was, I do not know exactly how many of them saw him, but they saw certain visions and they told about those visions which they had in a dream. They were not visions when they were waking, but they were dream experiences which were so powerful. And when they disclosed those experiences to Sri Ramakrishna, he said it's a experience which you should cherish and which you should meditate upon. And one such experience was seen in a dream. He had experienced, one of the devotees of Sri Ramakrishna experienced that he was in a very dark ocean where he was in a boat and the boat was being tossed up and down in the stormy sea. It was dark and stormy. He was feeling totally lost. He imagined or he dreamt that he was in that boat and he was about to drown. Then he saw somebody, some divine being asking him to follow him. and he saw an illuminated path on which he started walking. And that that divine personality was asking him to follow him. It was the path in the midst of an ocean. It was totally dark, and stormy weather was there. It was totally dark. There was no stars nor moon. It was cloudy also. So he was feeling totally lost, tossing about in a boat. You can imagine if a person is lost in the sea, in a stormy sea, with every darkness all around, and you see no hope of survival because the boat is also being tossed up and down, and anytime it may capsize. So under such circumstances, this devotee dreamt that a ray of light which looked like a road on which a person was walking. It was as it were, a road on the surface of the sea, surface of the water. And he seemed to be walking and beckoning him, asking him to follow him. So this very strong dream experience which the devotee had, he conveyed, or he said, he told Sri Ramakrishna that he had such and such a dream, very powerful dream. And Sri Ramakrishna was very happy. And he said, this is the right time. This indicates that you should go, your guru will soon come to you. So people get such experiences, and it is not very uncommon to even receive the mantra. And many times it has so happened that these people who have had a mantra in the dream by some holy personality, they go, and then when they meet their real guru and they ask him that I had a mantra, and he asks, then he finds to his surprise that the guru has given the same mantra which he had received in the dream. Such a dream mantra, or such a dream vision, or such a dream experience, it is as sacred, or sometimes more sacred than that what you experience in the waking state. And the devotee or the aspirant who gets such visions can continue to use that experience, which is very rare. It's not that these experiences come to everybody. But if he decides to make use of this experience and meditate, he can meditate upon it throughout the rest of his life. So that is one way of meditating, as we saw. That is one way of concentrating the mind. Swapna, Nidra, Jnana. So what is the Nidra Jnana? In Swapna Jnana, we understand some dream experience, especially if it is a divine experience, some kind of joy, a sense of joy or a sense of revelation, something new, which occurs to a person when he is dreaming. Such a person, when he wakes up, he finds it very hard to forget that dream experience. And is so much, there is a sense of joy, sense of wonderment, or a sense of revelation or of that experience which never leaves that aspirant. So Patanjali is speaking of such dream experiences which are rare, not only rare, but if we hold on to such experiences, Patanjali says, and if we meditate on those experiences now and then, or again and again, then it can help one to concentrate one's mind. But there are other ways also. He says, suppose you don't receive these experiences. Another method of calming the mind is Nidra, the sense of peaceful happiness that we experience in deep sleep. Now, it may be a very hard thing to do, but nobody amongst us has not experienced this wonderful sense of peaceful happiness after a good sleep, especially if it is a dreamless sleep. It's a deep sleep. Then you feel a sense of joy. When you wake up, you feel a sense of freshness. You feel when we wake up from such a deep and dreamless sleep. It should be dreamless. If you're tossing about in your dream and having so many nightmares, then it is not a good sleep. Or even if there is anxiety, worry, and other things, then one may not get such a good deep sleep, dreamless sleep. So that is known as Sushupti. The third state, Swapna, Jagrit, Sushupti. Jagrit, Swapna, Sushupti. Jagrit means the waking state. Swapna is the dream state, which if it is pleasant can be used to meditate, to calm down the mind, but not if it is any dream. You can't meditate on any dream and get peace of mind. It has to be a dream which brings a sense of joy after you experience that dream, and it reveals some great truth. As in the case of this devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, it revealed to him that in the darkness of this world, in the midst of sorrow and tribulation, he sees a ray of hope, a road on which a holy personality is leading him, asking him to follow. When Sri Ramakrishna heard about this experience, he said, very good, you meditate on this. This indicates that you will have a guru soon. So focusing on such experiences, such divine experiences, or focusing on sleep can help one to concentrate. We all know, according to Vedanta, the outermost is the physical or the Annamaya Kosha. Below that is the subtle sheet, or the, you can say, Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, which is made of the Manomaya Kosha, the Pranamaya Kosha, and the Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is of the nature of the inner essence of our personality, of things. It is the stuff of the spirit world. When we say a human being dies, he lives in the spirit world. He lives, his Sukshma Sharira still continues, except the gross pranas, which are not functional when the body goes away. So as I told you, not all the pranas remain. So that is why when somebody dies, we say the prana has left the body. So some of the pranas, most of the pranas leave the body. So prana don't cling to the subtle body, but some prana, some essence of that prana serves as a vehicle to hold the Sukshma Sharira together. This is the stuff of spirit world. So below this is below the gross Sharira, which decomposes or is destroyed when one dies, the subtle sheath still exists. And then below that, even finer than that, is our causal sheath, or the Karana Sharira, which I mentioned again and again. It is the complex of cause and effect. The cause and effect which is responsible for our personality as we find it now. We find certain tendencies, certain traits, certain samskaras, which manifest in spite of our effort to the contrary. We do not want certain things to happen. As you know, the famous incident where Duryodhana is complaining to Sri Krishna, said, I know what is right, what is wrong, but something within me, as it were, forces me to do the wrong thing. I know what is dharma, but I can't follow dharma. I know what is adharma, but I can't follow adharma. I can't leave adharma. I am always inclined, or my tendencies, the samskaras push me towards adharma. So that this kind of helplessness is because of the causal sheath in which you have this ego, the ahamkara also, the ego sense, which makes us see ourselves and the phenomena of the universe as separate entities. We think we are something separate from the universe, that strong ego sense. The more the ego sense, the more the Karana Sharira becomes dominant, and then you can't transcend it. So that's why they say humility is a great virtue in spirituality. Unless you give up the sense of ego, then you can't see, you will always see yourself as separate from the universe. The universe and the phenomena of the universe will always be seen as separate entities. And that is the cause of all our suffering. What is ignorance? Ignorance is the feeling of separateness with the cosmic mind, with the cosmic world. And that separation brings a sense of fear, a sense of jealousy, sense of envy. All the qualities are because of this ego sense, which is one of the characteristics of our Karana Sharira. And what is our Karana Sharira? It's made of a it is a complex made up of cause and effect. The karma, the samskaras which are created by our karma, which are stored in this Karana Sharira, the web of karma, you can say. The intricate web of karma is what defines our Karana Sharira, and according to that, our Sukshma Sharira behaves, and according to that, the corresponding effects or the corresponding tendencies can be seen in the gross body. So, what you see in the gross body has its root in the Karana Sharira. So, in the waking state, the Vedanta tells that all of these three sheets come between us and the Atman. No doubt, the gross Sthula Sharira, Sukshma, and the Karana Sharira, all three are impediments. No doubt. But when you come to the causal sheath, the two in dreamless sleep, the two outer coverings are not there. You don't feel the body. When you are in deep sleep, if you observe, everything, all the functions of the body are going on, but you are not aware of that. Neither you are aware of the dream world. So Sthula and Sukshma Sharira, for some time, they become quiet. And only the causal sheath and the ego sense that I am sleeping, I am enjoying a wonderful sleep, that remains. So naturally, if we see scientifically, the more subtle the sheath, the more subtle the Sharira, from Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, and then the Karana Sharira is nearest to the Atman in dreamless sleep than in any other state. So, when we compare these three states of our existence, the gross existence, Sthula Sharira, the subtle existence, and the causal existence, which is primarily made up of the ego sense. A strong sense of ego is all that remains. When you are in deep sleep, when you wake up from the deep sleep state, you just have a sense of peace and joy, which is because the Sthula Sharira, the gross body, and the subtle body, the dream, the dream body, you may say, because dreams are virtual realities which we see when we are not waking, when we are in an intermediate state. The intermediate state of deep sleep, of a dream is between the deep sleep state and the waking state. So when both the states, the Sthula, the gross, and the Sukshma, which is dream state, when they are suspended for some time in deep sleep, we are very near to the Atman, to the pure consciousness or the self. And in dreamless sleep, we are more nearer to our souls, which is known as Atman, than in any other phase of our ordinary unspiritual lives. When we are leading an ordinary life at the gross level or even at the subtle level, which comprises of dreams, whether they are daydreams or dreams at night, still we are living in a world which is slightly away from the pure consciousness. The grosser it is, the more further away you are from the consciousness. So, but still the deep sleep state is not the state of realization of the pure consciousness or the Atman, because if that were so, a person who goes into deep sleep would not come back to the dream and the waking state and exhibit the same characteristics. That is the difference between samadhi and deep sleep. When you go into samadhi, when you go into achieve that total concentration where you transcend even the Karana Sharira, the causal body, at that time your whole personality gets transformed. And you don't inhabit the same body. You may inhabit the same gross body, but your mind is transformed. Your attitude is transformed. The connection between you and the universe assumes a new proportion. And then you feel more at peace, even in the waking and the dream state. The whole personality is transformed, but it doesn't happen. In deep sleep state, Temporarily, the sthula, the gross state, the waking state, and the dream state is suspended. It does not vanish. It is not transcended. It just remains as it is, waiting for you to come back to those two states, come to dream or waking state. If somebody wakes you from deep sleep, you feel disturbed because you are enjoying some kind of peace, some kind of joy, because you are very, very close to that, your innermost soul or the consciousness. The the basic layer of ignorance is the only thing that is separating us, and that basic layer of ignorance, which is ego, which our samskaras are made up of, they cover this deep sleep state and do not allow us to see ourselves as we really are. So this sheath cannot be broken or cannot be transcended by mere sleeping. We cannot hope to wake up one morning from a deep sleep to find ourselves united with reality. But if we, instead of deep sleep, if we had reached samadhi, then we come back to the waking state. We find a new light. We become Jivan Muktas, free while living. Jivan Muktas means those who are free, those who experience that freedom. The separation from the three shariras, Stula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, and Karana Sharira, even while one is living. That is known as Jivan Mukti. Nevertheless, some faint hint, some slight radiation of that joyful peace of the Atman does come through us through this deep sleep state. That is why people yearn to have some good sleep throughout the day. If you don't get good sleep for a very long time, you become totally disturbed. You become totally disturbed because you are denied that small quota of deep sleep which you need for the mere survival of the body. Even though it is not an ultimate experience, the joyful peace, the slight radiation of the joyful peace of the Atman which you get, you touch the Atman for some time, even though it is due to ignorance. But even though the ignorance has enveloped you, but still you come so near that the taste of that deep sleep remains as a memory. And that deep sleep you yearn for. Every person, when he's tired, yearns. When the Sthula Sharira and the Sukshma Sharira gets tired because of wild imaginations, anxieties, and so much of tension interacting with the world, then the body gets tired, then it wants to just be one with the Atman. But somehow the ignorance, the thick layer of ego, the ego sense that I want to retain my identity, the labels that I've created for myself, that I'm a rich man, I'm a poor man, or I'm a strong man, I have wealth, and I have this, I have that. So those waking experiences, strong waking experiences, which has become a habit with us, and also the dream experiences, the daydreaming that we do, that we are far superior than others, and we are this, we are that, and the amount of samskaras that we have created as a result of wrong thinking, that creates a very strong sense of ego, which serves as a barrier which does not allow us to become one with the Atman. Though we touch that deep sleep state, it remains with us, the joyful peace. But when we return to the waking consciousness, we again feel as if we have been thrown from a deeply blissful state to a world where we have to start our struggle again. Even in some good dreams, when a person has, he feels that he is in heaven for some time at least. Of course, if he is in a nightmare, he is very happy to wake up and know that it was after all a nightmare. But if he has a good dream, then he might even enjoy it. And he might feel that, oh, I wish I could be in the dream a little longer. But but the uniform experience of everybody is that when they come back from deep sleep state, they really enjoy it because there is pure unalloyed joy. The only reason we get joy is because there is no trouble from our two lower gross physical body. For the time being, Their functions are going on, but they are suspended, as it were. The active functions of the body are suspended. The heart goes on, the circulation goes on, the autonomous nervous system is working, no doubt. But the other, your nervous impulses, the perceptions, the reactions, those things are suspended for some time. So also your dream experiences are also suspended. You neither get good dreams nor you get nightmares or bad dreams. So when that both these the vibrations of both these states, they calm down, there are no chitta vrittis. The only vrittis are that of nidra vritti. The deep sleep state, you have a vritti. If the EEG, electroencephalograph, if the readings are taken and a person goes to deep sleep, there are certain regular waves, undisturbed waves. So that undisturbed mental state, waves, of which ego is a small part, otherwise we won't remember. If the ego was not present there, then we would not have remembered that I had a good sleep. If you have a good sleep, only you can tell others that I had a deep sleep, because that memory, that ego, that I was undisturbed during the period of my deep sleep is very strong when you wake up. So when we wake up, when we come back, when we return to the waking consciousness, that memory of the deep sleep can be used according to Patanjali. If you don't have faith in gods and mantras and other things, he is giving us many choices. He is so liberal, Patanjali, that even if you don't have, you are a person without any faith, without any religious faith, you don't believe in any holy personality, you don't believe in anybody, you want to be independent, but you can't deny that you can meditate on the joy. No human being, however, whether he's an atheist or a theist or a religious person, can deny that he gets some joy out of deep sleep. A atheist also enjoys good sleep. A religious person also enjoys good sleep, would like to enjoy good sleep. So Patanjali says, why don't you meditate on this deep sleep? It is a very high state. Only thing, that layer of ignorance, once it goes, then you become one with the Purusha, the pure consciousness. So when you return to the waking consciousness from that deep sleep state, you try to meditate on it. Try to hold on it, hold it, and dwell in that state. Even in your waking state, you try to dwell in the memory of that state. It is a foretaste. It gives you a hint, a foretaste of the bliss of perfect knowledge. The bliss of perfect knowledge we have not experienced. It is, people say that you have this bliss of perfect knowledge, the bliss of enjoying pure consciousness. They say, but we have never experienced that. But the deep sleep state gives us a hint. It gives us a foretaste of what we can expect. Then we wonder if deep sleep is such a nice state, especially when you are going through troubled times. When we are going through troubled experiences in our waking and dream state, we don't get good sleep, we have anxieties, then we yearn for deep sleep, even at the cost of taking a few sleeping tablets. We somehow want deep sleep because there is some kind of innate joy, a foretaste of the bliss of perfect knowledge or realization of the perfect consciousness is definitely felt. That is why Patanjali says you can meditate on the experience you have in deep sleep state. That will help you, that will surely help you to get an experience of what, otherwise how will you explain to a person? He says, I do not know. I know the bliss of enjoying worldly objects. I know the bliss of good dreams, either daydreams. I can at least dream, even if I don't have anything. I can daydream and imagine I'm an emperor of the world. Nobody can stop me from dreaming. There are people who go on dreaming. It may not be a dream when they are sleeping, but it can be a dream which they experience when they are awake. It's like a daydream. They imagine themselves in a world which is their own creation, where they are not, where there is all enjoyment, there's no suffering. But still it falls short of the bliss of perfect knowledge, a foretaste of the bliss of perfect knowledge or perfect realization of that consciousness, Purusha, in deep sleep. So that is why many of the Vedantists, they give a lot of importance to the study of this Sushupti, the study of the deep sleep state. It is not an ordinary state, it's such a rare thing. And as the child grows, you see, the child sleeps because he has no worries, he has no anxieties. He can sleep for 8, 9 hours, and I don't think he will have a lot of dreams. He may have some dreams, especially when he grows older, because he sees so many horrific things, especially if you expose him to social media and TV and all those things. The poor child may get all sorts of nightmares, even in sleep. We disturb the sleep of the child. But imagine a child who's brought up in natural surroundings, who has not seen danger, who has not seen anything, and whose samskaras are good. Perhaps he will be having a very good quality sleep for several hours. He may be in bliss. But unfortunately, when he grows up, he is exposed to things, though they are not real, imaginary things, which create an impact. Slowly they create samskaras. They create anxieties. They create worries where there should be none. Worries are not natural to us. Worries should not be imaginary. If at all we have worries, they should have some basis. But most of our worries and anxieties are about things which have not happened or which are most probably not likely to happen. So this is the training which we give to our younger ones when they grow up, and they are taught to be cautious, to be worrisome, instead of depending on God or depending on some higher power, which if taught to the younger children, it can make their lives, because that will help them to get rid or be safely insulated from these worries and anxieties which have no basis at all. It may have some there may be some reason for worry, but worrying about the future, or even worrying or being anxious about the things done in the past, these are the two things which prevent the person from living in the present. And when that happens, his quality of sleep is disturbed. So a young child, when depending on how he is brought up and depending on the experiences of his whole life, the traumatic experiences especially, he feels that the quality of his sleep is reduced. And then he has to resort to all sorts of drugs or sleeping tablets and many things, tranquilizers. So he's exposed to a host of artificial methods. So the idea of deep sleep, Patanjali says, is a sacred idea. It is a foretaste of the bliss of experiencing samadhi, which is a result of perfect concentration. So he says, meditate on the joy, the bliss of deep sleep, not because deep sleep will give you that uh, realization. It will not unite you with the Purusha, but at least it will give you a foretaste. It will tempt you. If you meditate on this state, then you will get an idea. If deep sleep gives me so much joy, then how the wonderful state of samadhi, what can be the bliss, which is 1,000 times multiplied. So you can imagine, Patanjali is giving us so many options. Even if you don't believe in God, if you are an atheist, he still says you can't deny that you have enjoyed or you continue to enjoy the peace, the uh, foretaste which you get of the bliss of perfect knowledge or perfect unit, unification with the consciousness, the pure consciousness, which is the state of samadhi, which can be achievable only when the vrittis of the mind, when perfect concentration is attained. This is known as Samadhi Pada, which is verse number 39. We'll be coming to we'll be finishing this. Then comes Sadhana Pada, that is the chapter on how to attain this concentration. But first, the importance of concentration. If you remember, we began with Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga has Chitta Vritti Nirodha. First, the ideal state, the final state is described. Why do you need Chitta Vritti Nirodha and how to attain it comes later. But why do you need it? What are the different ways with which you can attain to the state of yoga? Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That is the second verse. Atha Yoganushasanam, that is the first. Then the second is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So Patanjali first gives the goal and says the Chitta Vritti can be the vrittis or the relentless waves of the mind can be subdued. If they are subdued, then only you reach the state of yoga. And if you don't, in the rest of the time, when you are not in yoga, when you are not in the state of yoga, then you are in the state of bhoga or in the state of restlessness, full of restlessness. You take the shape of the thought which you think. As you think, so you become. That is the essence of the third and fourth verses. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. Vritti sarupyam means as your vritti makes you dance, your form changes according to that. You are what your vrittis are. To put in very brief language, we are not what our bodies or personalities are. Those are our gross bodies, which form 1/3 or even less than that of our personality, our height, our body. But we are what our thoughts are. Buddha gave it so much importance. Vritti sarupyam itaratra, because when we are not in the state of yoga, we are what our thoughts are. If our thoughts are jumping like a monkey, then we will be compared to a monkey. If our thoughts are calm, then we will be compared to certain animals or certain human beings like Buddha, who are calm, meditative. So our thoughts determine the type of personality that we are. It's not the body. It's not the body language or the physical characteristics of our body. They may be important for some people, but a sound body without a sound mind is of no use. It's like a brute. A brute is very strong. He's more healthier than most of us. But then he is a brute because his mental development has not taken place. We would rather have a good mind or a good subtle body than a good gross body. So we give preference. But above that, we have to give preference to a good causal body. So when these vrittis become less and less, when the quality of your sleep increases or is enhanced, then you will realize that the vrittis in your life, because of practice of yoga, are reducing in number. The distractions, the diversions, and hence the anxieties. Anxiety also is a vritti, worry is also a vritti. So the more vrittis we have, the more rapidly they change, the more restlessness there is, the more peacelessness we feel. So the whole chapter till 38th verse and now 39th verse also will come. There's another method given by Patanjali. He tempts us or he encourages us by saying that whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, there are certain experiences in life about which you have to think deeply. These experiences are everybody's experiences, whether you are a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, or belonging to any tradition. Every human being has this experience. Every human being wants sleep. He will die if he doesn't get good sleep. Every human being has nightmares, has problems when he is. There is no person. So Bhagavan Buddha classified all these things into dukkha, called this as dukkha. The very existence, the very gross existence is sorrowful. And he found out a way that the more you subdue your desires, the more you subdue your vrittis, the more peaceful you become. You go back to that deep sleep state and then transcend it, and that will give you everlasting bliss of perfect identification with the consciousness or the Atman. So in verse number 39, Patanjali says, you can somehow get this concentration even if you can't understand this idea of meditating on deep sleep. Yatha abhimata dhyanadva. Yatha abhimata means whatever divine form or symbol that appeals to you as good, you meditate on that. Now, this is one of the most attractive characteristics of Patanjali's philosophy. You see the breadth of vision, its universality. Anybody, he doesn't even specify that you have to meditate on Om or anything. Fixing the mind on any divine form or symbol that appeals to one as good. If you like the cross, meditate on the cross. If you like Om, you meditate on Om. If you like a particular person, you meditate on that. If you don't like anything, meditate on the joy you get in deep sleep. At least that we can do. So any divine form, any divine symbol, even a stone, the stone of Kaaba or the Shivalinga, these are not divine forms. They are divine symbols. The cross, so all these symbols, or the dove is in the case of the Jews. So all those things, symbols, whatever appeals to you, or a sun, the rising sun, whatever appeals to you, or a good scenery. There are people, there are poets who would for hours together sit in nature and just enjoy the flowing brooks and the flowing water and the different visuals they saw. That itself became an object of meditation for them, the rishis. Some of them meditate on the great ice peaks, the Himalayas, just gazing at it for hours and hours together. So this breadth of vision which our rishis had or Patanjali had, its universal aspect. There is no attempt to impose any particular cult by Patanjali. No matter how dimly it shines through the layers of our ignorance. They may be called as ignorance. Apparently, for a person who thinks he is wise, he thinks these people are ignorantly worshipping the Shivalinga or some symbol or Kaaba stone or anything. But however dimly it may shine, we have a tendency, every human being has a tendency to fashion our own pictures and symbols of goodness. We have our own idea of goodness. And Patanjali says, please give freedom. He gives freedom to all aspirants. Take up any symbol which you think, which comes down to you. Maybe it is a dim vision now. You just know right from childhood that the symbol of Shivalinga or a cross, some faith in your heart which has come right from childhood. It is shining dimly. You do not know the significance of the cross. You do not know the significance of the Shivalinga. You do not even know the significance of the Avtara or the other symbols. But once we somehow, a dim perception of those symbols gives us a feeling of joy. And we consider them to be symbols of goodness, of happiness, of superiority, or of the ultimate, and project it to the outside world. But when we do it and when we say only this symbol is right or good, all other symbols are wrong, then there is Patanjali has a problem with it. He says, you allow that I am allowing you the freedom to choose your own symbol. That doesn't mean that you should allow that same freedom to the other person. So every picture, every symbol, or every idea, if it is holy and if it is accepted by that person, however ignorant he may be, it's accepted by that person with all sincerity. It may appear to be crude or childish in the beginning, but it may not appeal to you, to people who are rational. It may not appeal to all of us. But that is not important. Patanjali says the most important thing is how do you manage to control your vrittis? If a stone symbol helps you to control the vrittis, go ahead. Our attitude is more important. Whatever we truly and purely worship, we make it sacred. That is a idea behind this sutra. Therefore, Patanjali, according to Patanjali, if we follow this principle of scientific yoga, then all religions can meet together. We'll have no problem with each other because we can simply say, if one is following yoga, he can say Patanjali has given us the freedom to worship any symbol which I feel is holy and sacred for me. Because it is holy and sacred for me, doesn't mean I have to break your symbol or say that that symbol is not holy. It may not be holy for me, but my symbol is holy for me, and so I should have the courtesy or I should have the intelligence of allowing somebody else, provided he is sincere, and accept the fact that if he holds on to his symbol as pure and holy, he will reach the same goal as I will do. So whatever we truly, with full sincerity, we worship, we can give it a touch of the sacred to it. Therefore, we should always beware of bigotry. The other religions, the other faiths, they have certain symbols. It has become part of their culture, it has become part of their psyche. Let them have it. Patanjali says it is good to meditate on anything that you think is auspicious and holy. But at the same time, as we saw in the aphorism 32, which we discussed earlier, that we must limit ourselves to one way of seeking and keep to that. Otherwise, we'll waste all our energies in something which is known as window shopping. Window shopping, you go to different shops and just go on seeing, oh, is it? And you end up not buying anything. There are people who like this type of window shopping. So that is what religion has been reduced to. Most of us do this kind of window shopping. We waste all our energy by finding out or by trying to be curious about the various techniques, the various methods, and don't stick to something. That's why the need of a guru and the need for somebody to guide us and tell us that this is what your method is. So having a liberal attitude, and Patanjali doesn't say that because you are given the freedom to choose any symbol or any, once you have chosen it, please don't change. But don't insist on others having that same symbol, because for him something else may be sacred and he has to stick to that. So instead of doing this kind of wasting our energies in just some kind of spiritual window shopping, we can focus on something which we really consider to be holy and stick to it. So whether we go on a pilgrimage or to some shrine which we revere a lot, and if we do not bring our faith into it, then the purpose of that visit is not served. That is why they say when you go to a tirtha or a place of pilgrimage, go with full faith. Otherwise, better don't go. Don't go as a visitor. Because if you go Maybe you might go with curiosity, but if if curiosity is the only purpose with which you visit the places of pilgrimage, then it is not going to help you or the people who visit that very much. That is why most of the places are restricted. The entry is restricted to people who have faith. Otherwise, it not only harms the person who is visiting, but also the persons who, the vibrations of that atheist or that person who doesn't have faith, who has gone there just to, with some kind of curiosity, but not with much faith. So when we go to a place of pilgrimage, we have to take our Shraddha, our faith with us. Otherwise, it's better not to go. We should not forget that if it is any external shrine or any place of worship, at least our Vedanta believes that reality is everywhere. You can find him in the heart, sitting in the corner of your own house or room. But if at all you want to go to some place which you consider sacred, then go with reverence, not with the idea of criticism. That is harming yourself and harming the place also. So we can make contact that reality is everywhere. The reality which we are trying to seek in a particular shrine or a particular place of pilgrimage or some natural spot which we like, which we frequent regularly, then we have to contribute something to that. First of all, we should be sincere that we really like that place, and that place should help us to calm down our vrittis, and so that it becomes conducive to yoga. If it does that, then we have to go to such places and practice some kind of sadhana or some kind of spiritual practice there, so that we leave that place with much better vibration than we found it. So we have to contribute. So there is a famous poem I remember, the Hindu saint, the Saint Kabir. People do not know whether he was a Hindu or a Muslim, because he was a very liberal, he had universal ideas. So he says, especially of people who are very keen to go on pilgrimage, who think God is there, but God is not here within us. He says, I laugh. There's a beautiful doha of Kabir. When he says, I laugh when I hear that the fish in the water is thirsty. If a fish who is in water, always in water, says, I am thirsty, it is ridiculous. So also a person who thinks of his Ishta or the Lord or the holy symbol to be all pervading, to be all powerful, if he says he is only there and he is not in the place where I am, that means he is not, his concept of God is not very clear. So Kabir says it is as ridiculous as saying, a fish saying that it is in water and still it says, I am very thirsty. I am thirsty for water. Then he says, Kabir says in the next line, you wander restlessly from forest to forest, while the reality is within your own dwelling. You go from place to place searching for that peace of mind, when in reality he is within you, your own sharira, the sukshma sharira, the stula sharira, the sukshma, the karana, and beyond that is the shining atman. You're trying to superimpose it on some holy place and trying to search him there, it is fine. But you also have to remember that he is everywhere. He is within your own dwelling. If he is not within, then you can't find him without. Then Kabir says, the truth is here. Go where you will, to Banaras or to Mathura. Until you have found God in your own soul, the whole world will seem meaningless to you. So this is exactly what Kapila's mother, Devhuti, when she was not getting peace. She was finding everything meaningless when the son was about to leave. So he tells, you have not found God, you have not tried to see him in your own soul and see him in the hearts of others. He is everywhere. If you can't do that, then no matter how much you go on pilgrimage, no matter how many holy spots, Mathura, Banaras you visit, or wander from forest to forest, you're not, your life will be meaningless. So this is what this particular verse 39 or the Sutra 39 explains to us. So we have to remember that the verse says, no doubt you can worship him in anything, in any symbol. It's a universal approach to religion, which Patanjali is telling us. But that doesn't mean that you, in the verse 32 said that you meditate on something which you should not change. You should not be changing your object of worship. Otherwise, you will be just doing some kind of window shopping and not, and getting a taste of everything, a jack of all trades, but master of none. So one has to stick to one's ishta, but at the same time, allow others to follow their own paths, to follow their own symbols, to follow whatever they think is holy. So now the time is over. So let me see if there are some questions. If Patanjali says we can meditate on a dreamless state, dreamless sleep, yeah, Sushupti. Why does Vedanta say we should meditate on the form of a Ishta? No, Patanjali also says Ishvara Pranidhana Dva. The previous sutra which I referred to, even Patanjali says, he doesn't say, he says, if you are unfortunate enough to not to consider, not to understand the concept of Ishvara, it is meant for people who are absolutely atheists, who believe only in one, who only believe in the reality which they can perceive. So Patanjali says, okay, you don't believe in Ishvara, you don't believe in Om, Pranava. So many methods were given before. So he doesn't say, Vedanta doesn't say, even yoga says you can meditate on the form of a Ishta. Because Ishvara Pranidhanadva, or a holy person, the heart of a holy person. Now that is also mentioned in yoga. So yoga corroborates what Vedanta says. Vedanta, there are theistic Vedanta says you can meditate, you should meditate, or you can meditate on the Ishta because of the same reason. Even Patanjali says meditate on a symbol, a holy person, meditate on Ishvara, meditate on Om, Pranava, or meditate on the deep sleep state. So he is giving choices to people of varied faiths. If people don't have faith in this, do this. But for heaven's sake, calm down your mind. The essence of Patanjali's yoga is that by hook or by crook, take up any method that suits you. Take up a symbol, take up the heart of a holy person, take up Om. He gives, why do you think Patanjali is trying to give us so many sutras, showing us different ways? Because he knows without concentration, the person is destroyed. Without yoga, Chitta Vritti Nirodha, if it is not there, there's no way that we can get rid of the bondage of samsara and the sorrow associated with it. So he is trying various ways and means, giving us so many choices. You do this, you do this, you meditate on Ishta, you meditate on symbols, you meditate on anything. And somehow see to it that your mind is concentrated, the vrittis become less, because the more restless your mind, the more sorrow it will experience and the more problems you will face. It's a very simple truth, and this is actually based on Buddhism, depends a lot on this control of the mind. So many people even feel that Patanjali has borrowed heavily from Buddhism. May not be true, but it has some truth behind it, because Buddha believed in this. He said the cause of all sorrow is your desires. So I can't promise you peace. I can't tell you the untruth and misguide you, promising you heaven and this and that and that. I have not come for that. Buddha was very, that's why Swamiji says he was one of the sanest person one comes across in history. He did not promise anything to anybody. No heavens, no gods, no nothing, no dogmas. He said, the only thing I know is there is sorrow. And if you want to get rid of sorrow, this is the path. Reduce the waves. So Patanjali, with folded hands, he is telling again and again to all these verses. Meditate on God, meditate on Ishta, meditate on Om, meditate on symbol, meditate on deep sleep state, meditate on dream experience. Take any one of these methods and somehow convince your mind that unless you calm down the mind, there is no hope in this life or in the life after death also. So, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the second verse, is the key verse which says the goal is this. He doesn't talk of God realization. He says the state of yoga can be achieved, but if you want restlessness, if you want sorrow, then go ahead. Nobody stops us. Nobody, Patanjali doesn't force us to stop the vrittis. He said, if you want yoga, if you want peace, if you don't want to be just tossed around here and there in this world, mercilessly by circumstances, by your own thoughts, by others' thoughts, by just like a machine or just like a toy or like a boat in a storm, we are thrown, or a leaf in a strong wind. The leaf goes here, goes there. As the wind flows, the leaf is tossed around. It has no security, no safety, nothing. So that is the result of having a restless mind. And all these sutras are meant to keep the mind or make the mind calm. That is the essence of spirituality. Now, faith lives in the heart and stays there. This is a universal truth. Can the faith be disappeared? Just wonder. Yes, faith comes and goes. It won't disappear. Yes, Patanjali, some people say he came after Buddha. Some people say he preceded Buddha. It is very difficult to understand. But anyway, if he came after Buddha, then the truth that the Buddhism has influenced Patanjali's yoga is true. Or if he came before Buddha, then maybe the Buddhism was influenced by Patanjali's yoga, because Buddha had a Sankhya teacher that we all know. He studied all the different systems. Buddhism came much later. Before them, there were Sankhya's. Sankhya's are definitely older. The Sankhya philosophy is taken. So yoga can be older. The yoga, Patanjali may have come afterwards, but Patanjali is not the founder of yoga school. The sutras he might have compiled, but these sutras were there even before the ideas were there in seed form. So the ideas of concentration and everything were there. So, okay, so I think the questions are over. So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. We'll have the Gospel of Holy Mother's class tomorrow.